Welcome, friends. Welcome back to the kitchen. Welcome back to Sunday Morning and the Old Cookbook Show. Today we're going to do a recipe out of this cookbook sent in by one of our viewers. Thank you very much for sending us these cookbooks. They are a fantastic resource. And if you've got a bunch of old cookbooks that you don't know what to do with and you don't want to keep them any longer, I'd be happy to take them off your hands because I really love these. So today's cookbook is called Aunt Sammy's Radio Recipes Revised. So this was published in 1931 by the Bureau of Home Economics and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And today we're going to do a recipe called green tomato pie. Now, I had no clue who Aunt Sammy was. None whatsoever. So I had to look it up. And of course, Aunt Sammy is Uncle Sam's wife. I did not know that. Not being American, not totally into the whole Uncle Sam, Aunt Sammy thing. And so Aunt Sammy's Radio Recipes, it was a weekly radio show that they produced scripts and sent the scripts out to the radio stations. And then they had someone local who would be the voice of Aunt Sammy. So it always sounded like your neighbor was Aunt Sammy. And so it was a radio show that was all about helpful home tips and recipes and ways that you could save money during the Depression. And it was really cool that Aunt Sammy was voiced by someone local to you, because then it didn't sound like government propaganda, someone from Washington telling you what to do. It sounded like your neighbor. And I think that's a really kind of cool perspective on this cookbook. Now we're using green tomatoes, and we're early September here in Toronto, and these are green tomatoes from our garden. Any tomatoes that are out there that are green like this aren't going to ripen. It's too late in the season. The days are starting to get too short. It's not going to be warm enough. So I'm always looking for different ways to use up green tomatoes. So we're going to find out how this pie works. So I'm slicing these up first. Now, in addition to the tomatoes, it tells me to slice in half of a lemon. So we'll cut that up as well. And I imagine the lemon is a little bit of flavor, but also pectin and other things to thicken it up. Tomatoes and lemon go into this pot. Now I'm supposed to cook this together until the tomatoes are almost tender. So I'm going to put a lid on it. I'm going to watch it very closely because I have no clue how long that's going to take. In this bowl I have sugar, and to that I'm going to add cornstarch, which will be a thickener in this recipe, and a little bit of salt. And I'm going to mix this together and then set it aside. Yeah, okay, not yet. Looking good, I think, although, you know, what do I know? So I'm supposed to take this off the heat now, and we take the tomatoes out of the liquid, and we let the liquid cool down before we move on to the next step. Now, it doesn't tell me what to do with the lemon, so I am going to pull it out and set it aside, because I don't think it gets included into the pie. This is a two-crust pie, and the bottom crust gets blind baked. And I've never done a two-crust pie this way, so I'm just going to go with it. I'm going to follow the instructions, and the instructions are very clear about how they want you to blind bake it. And again, it's not the way I would normally blind bake a pie shell. So you're supposed to dock the crust with a fork, which I normally do. And then it goes into a hot oven for 10 minutes without any pie weights, anything like that. So let's give it a try. Now, this goes back on the heat, and we mix in the sugar, salt, and cornstarch. And we stir this until it starts to thicken. And while that's going, we'll roll out the top crust. Now, this cookbook, like a lot of other cookbooks from this time period, doesn't say what size the pie plate is. I chose to use a 9-inch shallow pie plate, since that seems to be what most of the pies in this time period tend to use. So we'll roll out the top crust to match. Now, when you're rolling pie dough, don't be afraid to lift it up and move it around. And if it starts to stick a little bit, just put a little bit more flour down. I'll often turn it over a couple of times. It's very forgiving. Don't think too much about it. Okay, I think the top crust is big enough. We'll check on our filling. It's looking pretty good. So I'm going to turn the heat off, and I'm going to add the tomatoes back in and get them coated with that sauce. And I think the bottom shell is ready to come out of the oven. But before it comes out of the oven, I need to add these two things. So this is cinnamon, goes in, and some butter. I'm supposed to mix those in. Let them melt in. Now I can get the pie shell out of the oven. Let's see, how'd we do? A little bit of shrinkage. Probably not the greatest blind baked pie shell I've ever made, but it'll be okay. So, and in goes the filling. I think I've got the right sized pie shell. A little bit of water around the outside, and hopefully we'll get the top to stick on. Now, I have never, I think I said this earlier, I have never done a double crust pie where the bottom crust is blind baked. Totally new territory for me. So, let's see if we can get the top crust on here. And I know people are going to tell me roll it over the rolling pin, it's so much easier. I don't have a problem doing it this way. So let's pinch it on and see what happens. And we'll get a knife. Cut a vent hole in the top and into the oven.
Hey, Glenn.
Hey, Jules.
Hey, friends.
So you better get a fork and a spoon.
Is that runny?
It's a little bit runny, and the first piece isn't always, it's not too bad.
First piece isn't always graceful, no.
No.
But that's actually not too bad. All right, I got one of each.
Okay, so, a little bit runny. I think it'll be fine.
That's okay.
I am going to use a spoon, though. I think the top is a little bit plain. The recipe said nothing about putting on like a milk wash or an egg wash and
Or a
some
little sugar or anything, okay.
I think it, presentation-wise, would benefit from that.
And of course, there are those people who are super skilled at all the very lovely pie crusts.
I know, and they make little leaves, and
They're lovely.
I know.
Okay, so I'm fascinated because it's clearly a fruit pie.
It is a fruit pie. It is a fruit pie.
I can see the fruit.
It's a,
But it doesn't look, it looks
green
more like
tomato.
I was going to say, it looks more like a tomato than like a plum or anything.
it is a green tomato.
There we go.
Now, it's almost, I don't know.
It's got a really tart, it's almost got a little bit of a bitter in it,
It's a little bit bitter, yeah.
right? But it also still has
It's
it's
got,
got all those other lovely flavors of a fruit pie, though.
yeah.
You know, the sweetness, there's still a sweetness to it, which of course is probably the sugar.
yeah. It could maybe do with a little bit more of a thickener, but
I might switch to the fork.
and I think that's a really good pie. I think that people would be very intrigued by this if they'd never had, a green tomato pie before.
Yes, it's intriguing. But there's I'd need something to counter that bitterness. I'm not that fond of the bitter.
There is a little bit of bitter, and so I had to slice up half a lemon and boil that,
Maybe that's where.
and that could be partially where the bitter is coming from.
If I was going to predict,
Yeah.
that might be where it came from. Was the lemon like whole, like
Well,
rind and all?
it said just slice up half a lemon and put it in. So maybe you do get a little bit of bitter from the pith, which makes sense. So maybe zesting the lemon and then squeezing the juice in. I don't know. I think this is a great, like I say a lot of times, a great starting point to play with this idea.
I am super surprised though, as a pie.
Yeah.
With the green tomato. So
Yeah, I'd make this again. I would definitely make this again. I might tweak it a little bit more. I might and vary the spices a little bit more because I think that you could drop this down and fool people almost apple.
Yeah, I think you could almost apple. The giveaway would be oddly not the texture,
No, the texture.
but the fact that the visual on the tomato and the seeds and
see
things
the-
like that,
yeah.
right? The seeds are a bit of a giveaway that it's not apple.
So, Aunt Sammy.
Oh, there you go. That's okay.
I would give this a try. If you've got some green tomatoes hanging around in your garden that aren't going to ripen, this might be another option to give a try. So, green tomato pie. Thanks for stopping by. See you again soon.